The first gunshot cracked through Riverside Plaza like thunder splitting the sky. Darius Mitchell had just walked out of the discount store, bag of clearance sneakers for his boy in hand, when the world exploded into chaos. People froze mid-step, heads whipping around, trying to find the source. A woman's scream cut through the air. Near the fountain, a man in a dark jacket moved fast through the crowd, hand buried deep in his coat, eyes locked on something ahead. Then Darius saw her. A little girl in a purple sundress, maybe 5 years old, standing completely alone on the shining marble floor. She clutched a stuffed unicorn in her small hands, her face a mask of pure terror. Her mother wasn't anywhere in sight. The man in the jacket was closing in, moving with dangerous purpose, each step faster than the last. Darius's body moved before his mind caught up. 8 years as an Army Ranger kicked in hard, muscle memory overriding everything else. He cut through the frozen crowd, old instincts flooding back like they'd never left. He was almost to her when the second shot rang out, loud and terrifyingly close. Darius hit the girl with his shoulder, scooping her up and twisting his body to take the impact as they went down. Her unicorn bounced across the marble. White-hot pain exploded through his left shoulder. But he kept her wrapped tight against his chest, his body completely covering hers. "You're safe, kid," he said, his deep voice steady despite the burning agony. "I got you." She was shaking hard but unharmed. The bullet had torn through him, not her. He'd done it. Mall security swarmed in from every direction, radios crackling urgent codes. The man in the jacket had disappeared into the panicking crowd, gone like smoke. Darius kept his eyes on the girl as sirens wailed closer, making absolutely sure she was okay before he'd even think about letting go. Then a woman came running, tall and elegant even in her panic, designer heels clicking fast on the marble. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek bun, her cream-colored blazer perfect except for the terror written across her brown face. She dropped to her knees beside them, pulling the child into her arms with desperate hands. "Zoe, oh God, baby, are you hurt?" Her voice cracked with fear as she checked her daughter over with shaking fingers. Then her dark eyes found Darius, specifically the blood spreading fast across his faded denim jacket, turning the fabric dark and wet. Her expression shifted from raw panic to something cooler, more calculating. This wasn't just a scared mother. This was someone used to crisis management, to assessing situations under pressure. "Thank you," she breathed. Her voice controlled now, studying Darius like she was cataloging every detail about him. Darius nodded once, suddenly aware of how out of place he must look. 20 minutes later, Darius sat in the back of an ambulance, his muscular arm wrapped in clean white gauze that was already showing red. The EMT, a young guy with kind eyes, asked if he wanted to go to the hospital for proper treatment. Darius declined. He couldn't afford another medical bill, not with his insurance situation. At 36, Darius lived a careful life built on tight budgets and tighter margins. He worked overnight shifts at a packaging plant on the industrial side of town, operating machinery and loading pallets until sunrise. He had a small apartment in a working-class neighborhood where his 9-year-old son Isaiah slept in the bedroom with the window that caught morning light just right. Darius didn't complain. Complaining changed nothing. But when people saw him, worn jeans, work boots, baseball cap pulled low, they didn't expect much. That was usually fine. Being underestimated meant being left alone. The woman from the mall stood about 15 feet away, still holding her daughter close, occasionally glancing toward Darius. Her name was Victoria Harrington, he'd overheard the police say. You could tell by the way she spoke to the officers, calm, firm, choosing each word carefully, that she was used to being in control. She wore clothes that probably cost more than Darius made in 2 months. People kept approaching her with obvious deference, like someone genuinely important. Later, he'd learned she was the CEO of Sterling Biotech, a pharmaceutical company making waves in the medical community. Everybody in business circles knew her name. Victoria's focus stayed on her daughter, checking her over and over with a mother's thorough concern. But her eyes kept sliding back to Darius, measuring him like a complex equation she needed to solve. There was something analytical in her gaze, like she was collecting data, forming assessments. The police took statements. Darius kept his brief and factual. One officer, a middle-aged white guy with suspicious eyes, barely looked up from his notepad. "So you just happened to be there?" His tone carried clear doubt, like heroism from someone who looked like Darius couldn't possibly be real. "Yeah, wrong place, right time," Darius replied simply. The officer wrote something down, but didn't thank him. Didn't acknowledge the blood soaking through Darius's jacket, or the child he'd just saved. Didn't even make eye contact. It wasn't the first time Darius had felt invisible to people in uniforms. Nearby, a tall black man in an expensive gray suit whispered something urgent to Victoria, his hand gesturing sharply. Terrell Banks, Darius would later learn, Victoria's head of security and a former FBI agent. His job was keeping Victoria and Zoe safe, and he clearly didn't appreciate that some stranger had stepped into his role today, exposing a massive hole in his security protocols. Terrell gave Darius a long, hard look, like he was waiting for him to slip up somehow. The EMT cleared his throat. "You're lucky it missed the bone. Should still get it checked properly, though. Bullet wounds can get infected without antibiotics." Darius just nodded, knowing he wouldn't go. Couldn't afford the emergency room visit or the prescription. Across the parking lot, his neighbor's car pulled up. He'd called Mrs. Chen from the ambulance, asking her to bring Isaiah. His son jumped out, eyes going wide with fear when he saw the thick bandage wrapped around his father's shoulder. "Dad!" Isaiah ran to him, his young face full of worry, stopping just short of hugging him for fear of causing pain. Darius gave him a small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's nothing, little man. Just a scratch. I'm good." Terrell Banks was still watching from across the lot, his expression unreadable. Victoria remained silent but observant, her eyes tracking Darius's every move. The message was clear in the air between them. Darius had done something good, something heroic even. But he didn't belong here in their world. He was a momentary intersection of lives that shouldn't have crossed. Now it was time for everyone to return to their proper places. Darius led Isaiah back to Mrs. Chen's car, accepting the ride home. He'd get his truck tomorrow when his shoulder felt better. As they walked away, he felt Victoria's eyes boring into his back, studying him. He didn't turn around. Some distances weren't meant to be crossed. The apartment was quiet that night. Isaiah had finally fallen asleep after asking 100 questions about the shooting, about guns, about whether Dad was really okay. Darius sat alone at the small kitchen table, a glass of water sitting untouched in front of him, ice slowly melting. The local news played quietly on the TV in the corner. "A packaging plant worker became an unlikely hero today," the anchor said in that practiced voice, "when he saved a young girl from what police are calling an attempted kidnapping at Riverside Plaza." Darius's image filled the screen, standing by the ambulance, looking older than he felt, dried blood visible on his jacket. The caption read simply, "Darius Mitchell, 36, packaging plant worker." The young girl has been identified as Zoe Harrington, daughter of Victoria Harrington, CEO of Sterling Biotech. Mrs. Harrington declined to comment, but sources close to the family say she is extremely grateful for Mr. Mitchell's quick action. Darius reached for the remote and switched off the TV. The silence felt heavy. He hadn't asked for this attention, hadn't wanted his name on the evening news. Tomorrow, people at the plant would ask questions, want details he didn't want to give. His supervisor, Roy, would give him that look, half impressed, half suspicious, like Darius had somehow planned this disruption. His phone buzzed with a text from his sister Keisha in Atlanta. "Saw you on the news, brother. So proud of you." Darius didn't respond. Hero. The word didn't fit right. Heroes got celebrated, recognized, thanked. For 4 years, since his wife Shanice had died from complications during childbirth with their second child, who didn't survive either, he'd worked at building a life where he could be invisible, where no one asked about the nightmares that sometimes woke him at 3 in the morning, shouting tactical orders to soldiers who weren't there anymore. where no one wondered why a man with his training was operating packaging machinery for barely above minimum wage. The pain in his shoulder throbbed, reminding him he should take the painkiller the EMT had prescribed, but he wouldn't fill it. Too expensive, even with discount programs. He'd managed with over-the-counter medication before, always had, always would. 2 days later, Darius was back at work. The bandage tugged whenever he lifted something wrong, but he didn't complain, didn't slow down. His supervisor, Roy, a gruff white man in his 50s with a permanent scowl, watched him from the office window like always. Darius kept moving, loading pallets, checking shipment numbers with practiced efficiency. Nights here were long and quiet, exactly how he preferred them. Just rows of boxes stretching into shadows, the mechanical hum of conveyor belts, the familiar smell of cardboard and machine oil. But tonight wasn't normal. Word had spread about the mall incident. Co-workers who'd barely nodded at Darius for years now stopped to ask detailed questions. Some seemed genuinely concerned. Others just wanted the thrill of proximity to something exciting, something to break the monotony. Darius kept his answers short, then redirected back to work. By midnight, most people had lost interest. Near the end of his shift, around 5 in the morning, when exhaustion was setting in, Darius's phone buzzed. Unknown number. He almost ignored it, but answered on the third ring, stepping outside into the pre-dawn chill. "Mr. Mitchell." The voice was sharp, male, authoritative. "This is Terrell Banks, head of security for Sterling Biotech. Mrs. Harrington would like to speak with you this afternoon. 2 o'clock at our headquarters downtown. We'll expect you." It wasn't phrased as a request. Darius thought about refusing, about maintaining his distance from that world, but curiosity got the better of him. What could Victoria Harrington possibly want with him now? He agreed to be there at 2. That morning, after dropping Isaiah at school and watching him run toward his friends, Darius faced a familiar problem. His regular babysitter had a doctor's appointment she couldn't miss. His backup, Mrs. Chen, had her book club. Darius sat in his truck staring at his phone, frustration building. He had exactly 2 childcare options, and both were unavailable at the worst time. This was his life, a constant tightrope walk with no safety net, no margin for unexpected meetings. People with money didn't understand what it meant to have zero slack in the system. Finally, he called his sister Keisha. She lived 3 hours away but had been wanting to visit. She agreed to drive down, though it meant missing her own work shift. Another debt Darius would have to repay somehow. At exactly 2 o'clock, Darius stood in the vast glass lobby of Sterling Biotech headquarters. All clean lines, expensive furniture, young professionals in sharp suits moving fast with tablets and coffee cups. The space felt alien. He felt completely out of place in his flannel shirt and work jeans, his boots scuffed from factory floors. The receptionist, a young black woman with flawless makeup, had looked him up and down when he gave his name, her polite smile never quite reaching her eyes. "Mr. Banks will be with you shortly," she said in a neutral tone. Darius sat in a chair that probably cost more than his rent, trying not to shift uncomfortably. The wound in his shoulder throbbed. He hadn't slept well. The combination of pain and late shifts left him feeling disconnected. Above the reception desk, a large screen played a company video on loop. Victoria's face appeared, speaking confidently about innovation and healing, about changing lives through medical breakthroughs. In that setting, with perfect lighting and designer clothes, she seemed even further removed from his world than at the chaotic mall. Terrell Banks appeared by the elevators, expression neutral but cold. No handshake, no smile. "This way," he said curtly, turning without waiting. They rode in silence to the 24th floor. The elevator was whisper quiet and impossibly fast. When the doors opened, Terrell led Darius through open office spaces where people glanced up briefly, then quickly looked away. They entered a large conference room where Victoria was already seated at the head of a polished table. She looked like she'd stepped from a magazine, navy suit perfectly tailored, hair elegant, but her eyes showed fatigue beneath the professional polish. Her phone buzzed on the table. She silenced it without looking. Mr. Mitchell, she began, tone measured. We appreciate what you did at the mall for my daughter. Darius nodded once. I'm glad she's okay. Terrell crossed his arms, posture aggressive. Here's the situation. You've been in the news. Reporters are asking questions about you, digging into your background. We need to make sure there's nothing that could put Mrs. Harrington or her daughter at risk. For all we know, you could have been part of this. Darius's jaw tightened. I didn't do anything wrong. I saved a kid. That's what we need to be certain of, Terrell said flatly. Victoria leaned forward, fingers interlaced. We live in a complicated world, Mr. Mitchell. Stories get twisted. I can't have my daughter's name linked to someone who might... She stopped, reconsidering her words. I just need to know you're not a threat to my family. Darius had been looked at this way before, like he had to prove he deserved to exist in spaces not designed for people like him. I'm not a threat. I work. I take care of my kid. That's my life. Terrell slid a thick stack of papers across the table. Sign this non-disclosure agreement. Stop talking to the press. We'll also need to run a comprehensive background check. Darius stared at the papers, cold settling in his gut. So you want me to sign away my right to talk about saving her? It's about protecting privacy, Terrell said flatly. About protecting the family. It's about control, Darius said quietly. The room temperature seemed to drop. Victoria's phone buzzed again. She didn't answer. Instead, she studied Darius with new intensity. There was military precision to his posture, she suddenly realized. Controlled awareness of space. The way his eyes had cataloged exits when entering. The way he positioned himself with his back to the wall. We're offering to cover all medical costs from your injury, she said, tone softening slightly. Full treatment, follow-up, physical therapy, whatever you need. I'm fine, Darius said, standing. I didn't come here for money. Terrell stepped into his path, blocking the door. Think carefully about your son before you make this harder than it has to be, Mr. Mitchell. That hit harder than the bullet. Darius went completely still, every muscle tensing. His voice, when it came, was low but clear, carrying unmistakable warning. Don't ever use my son to threaten me. Do you understand? Something flickered in Victoria's eyes. Surprise, perhaps respect, maybe shame. For a moment, her corporate mask slipped, and Darius caught a glimpse of the mother beneath the CEO, the woman who'd run desperately through the mall searching for her child. Mr. Banks, that's enough, she said firmly. Mr. Mitchell is free to go. Thank you for coming in. Darius walked out without another word, footsteps echoing. In the elevator, he exhaled slowly, controlling the anger that had risen sharp at Terrell's threat. He'd spent years learning to manage that anger, to channel it into precision rather than rage. Those were hard-won skills the Army had given him, refined through countless situations where losing control meant people died. When Darius got home that evening, Isaiah was sitting at the kitchen table doing homework, small hand gripping a pencil. Keisha had made spaghetti, Isaiah's favorite. How was it? Isaiah asked, looking up with curious eyes. Just a meeting, Darius said, dropping his keys by the door. He didn't mention the papers they wanted him to sign. He didn't mention how Terrell had looked at him like a problem to be managed. Isaiah had enough to worry about. Third grade was hard enough. The next morning, Darius's phone rang while he was making Isaiah's lunch. Turkey sandwich, carrot sticks, juice box. Roy from the plant calling hours before his shift. Darius, Roy said, voice uncomfortable. Corporate wants to talk to you. Seems they got a call from someone at Sterling Biotech about the situation. Darius frowned, knife freezing mid-spread. About what? Roy sighed. Didn't say exactly, but they're nervous about the publicity, about liability. Might be best if you take a few days off, paid time. A few days off meant no paycheck, despite what Roy called it. Rent was due in 2 weeks. Isaiah needed new winter boots badly. His current ones were too small, hurting his feet. The wound in Darius's shoulder throbbed in time with his heartbeat. "Roy, I need the hours. You know my situation." "I know, man. But orders came from upstairs. Nothing I can do. Take 3 days minimum. Think of it as a break." But Darius knew what paid time meant for hourly workers. It meant go away until we decide if you're worth the trouble. It meant your next check will be light. It meant the margin between making rent and falling behind just got thinner. Outside the window, Isaiah was waiting for the bus, lunchbox in hand, looking small in his too-big jacket, a hand-me-down from his cousin. Darius had promised him a new one this winter. Promises were easy. Keeping them took money, which required work, which was being taken away. Darius's phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He didn't answer. He didn't know yet if the shot he'd taken was the real wound or if the worst damage was still coming. That night, Darius sat at the kitchen table after Isaiah had gone to bed, the apartment quiet except for distant traffic. The TV was on low, some news anchor talking about the mall shooting again, but Darius wasn't listening. He had a small wooden box in front of him, one he hadn't opened in years. The brass latch was worn, and when he flipped it open, the smell of gun oil and worn leather drifted out, carrying memories. Inside were 3 things: a folded American flag from Shanice's funeral, a tarnished military challenge coin from his unit, a letter creased so many times it was starting to tear. He didn't take the letter out. He just looked at it, letting his mind drift back. The air had been hot and dry, the kind that sticks in your throat. Darius had lain flat on a rooftop, rifle balanced on its bipod, every adjustment calculated. Through the scope, the streets below looked close enough to touch. His spotter's voice came through his ear, calm, giving corrections. Darius adjusted his breathing. Slow, steady, mechanical. He locked on the target, a hostile moving through civilians. Every muscle knew what to do. The shot had to count. Lives depended on it. It did. Target down. Mission accomplished. Back in the kitchen, Darius shut the box and slid it back into the cupboard above the fridge, behind old papers. He didn't talk about those years with anyone. Not Isaiah, not Keisha, not anyone who asked. People saw the baseball cap, the factory job, the modest apartment, and thought they knew who he was. That was fine. Easier even. But tonight, with Terrell's threats echoing, with his job uncertain, he wondered how far Victoria Harrington's people would go. Would keeping quiet protect Isaiah or put him in more danger? Sometimes hiding wasn't the safe choice. 3 days later, federal agents knocked on his door. "Mr. Mitchell, we need you to come with us. There are new threats against Victoria Harrington. The shooter wasn't acting alone." At Sterling Biotech, the building swarmed with security. Terrell was barking orders when Darius arrived with agents. "What's he doing here?" the female agent replied. "Because he might be the only one who can stop what's about to happen." Darius walked to the security monitors without asking permission. On screen, a man in maintenance clothes wheeled a cart toward the elevator. His posture was wrong, too rigid, moving too fast. "That's him," Darius said. Terrell scoffed. "We've got hundreds of contractors. What makes you think—" His right hand never leaves his pocket. He's hiding something. False gait to mask a limp. Prior military injury. Darius was already moving before Terrell could respond. The service hallway smelled of chemicals. The man was halfway to the elevator when Darius called out, "Stop right there." The man kept walking. Darius closed the distance fast. He kicked the cart sideways and grabbed the man's wrist, twisting until a gun clattered down. The man swung, but Darius ducked, hooked his leg, brought him down hard. By the time security arrived, Darius was kneeling on his back, gun kicked away. Victoria rushed in, pulling Zoe close when she saw the weapon. The lead officer spoke. "If this man had gotten upstairs, we'd have a hostage situation. Mitchell spotted him in 10 seconds. Victoria looked at Darius, really looked at him. "You've done this before, many times. Once or twice. You have specialized training. Let's say I used to keep worse people than him from hurting good people." Victoria turned to Terrell. From now on, if Darius says something's a threat, you listen without question. Later, Victoria approached Darius. You didn't have to come today. I know. Maybe I was wrong about you, Mr. Mitchell. Maybe. I'd like to talk more. About security, about what you saw. Darius checked his watch. I need to get back to Isaiah, I promised. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow. Over the next weeks, Darius integrated into the security team. Threats continued. The investigation deepened. Federal agents uncovered that Gregory Walsh, Victoria's former business partner, had hired the surveillance. At a charity gala weeks later, the event was a diversion. Gregory and an accomplice were infiltrating Sterling headquarters. Darius and Victoria raced back. They found them in the executive suite. Gregory Walsh, a lean man with cold eyes, smiled. Hello, Victoria. Corporate espionage seems right up your alley, Gregory. Darius created doubt about the stolen data's location. In that moment of distraction, Darius moved. He disarmed the accomplice. Security burst in. Later, flying to retrieve the children from protective custody, Victoria made an offer. Director of Integrated Security, full autonomy, Darius accepted. But I need flexible hours. Isaiah needs stability. We'll develop family-friendly policies together. Driving back at dawn, Isaiah asked from the back seat, Can Zoe come over this weekend? Victoria smiled. This weekend would be perfect. As they crossed the bridge into sunrise, Victoria's hand touched his on the console. Shared understanding. Darius Mitchell had stepped into the light, and in that visibility he'd found strength, connection, and finally home. My beautiful people, thank you for watching this emotional story. If it touched your heart, please like this video so more people can learn from it. And if you're new here, hit subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. Don't miss any of our powerful stories. Before you leave, tell me in the comments, what part of today's story touched you the most? Your comments help the channel grow and bring more stories your way. See you in the next emotional journey.